A very warm welcome to the 17th episode of the podcast of the World Wind Energy Association, The World of Wind Power. My name is Stefan Gsänger, and it's my pleasure that I can welcome today a guest from an Eastern European country, from Ukraine. Ukraine will be the country we will talk about today, and it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Yevhenii Kontorshchykov. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Yevhenii, welcome.
Thank you, Stefan. It's really a pleasure to be here on your podcast and to cover such a relevant topic for your listeners about Ukraine and specifically Ukrainian wind energy market.
Yes, and I'm sure that people will be very interested to hear what's going on in Ukraine. Some may know that, yeah, there is still some new investment, but still, I think everybody knows the condition under which you're living at the moment. Russia attacked Ukraine 3 years ago. You're still, I think you told me you're living in Kiev. You're still living there under the threat of being bombed from Russia. So it's a very tough situation probably for you permanently. So let me ask you first, how are you personally today?
Today, I'm very good actually. I'm waiting for my wife to return from Italy, but in the context of the war, of course, it is raging on. But we, as a nation, are standing firmly, and so our energy sector. Regarding the attacks from the Russian Federation, there have been signs that Russian Federation is preparing to launch a new wave of attacks on our energy system. But I do believe that our key stakeholders, including NPC, Ukrenergo, all relevant authorities will do their best to preserve the stability of the system. Regarding the Kiev itself, for the past months, like a couple of months, we've suffered a lot of air raid alerts and drone and missile attacks. So on 17th of June, you may have heard that Russia launched the biggest missile combined attack on Ukraine, and 24 civilians were killed and hundreds more were injured. So, yeah, it's pretty harsh, but the nation is standing strong, and so our energy sector.
Let's talk about that now in detail. I think it is very important also to talk about it because, of course, everybody understands that this conflict, by also like other big conflicts we have in the world at the moment, they are related to some degree, also have their roots in energy supply. I mean, in that case, of course, Russia is the biggest fossil fuel supplier for Europe, at least, one of the biggest of the world. Also, uranium, of course, for nuclear power. And that makes it even, I think, more obvious for everyone that renewable energy is a maybe the most important solution for the long term kind of solving such conflicts. But let me maybe I invite you first to explain a little bit your personal background, and you are working for the Ukrainian Wind Energy Association, which is an association that similar exists in other countries. But maybe you introduce yourself. How have you come to work for wind energy, and what's the role of the Ukrainian Wind Energy Association?
Uh, yeah, of course. So I'll start with myself. My name is Yevhenii Kontorshchykov, and I'm analyst at Ukrainian Wind Energy Association, the biggest renewable industry association in Ukraine. And I've been working here for almost 2 years on a position of analyst of our Ukrainian Wind Energy Secretariat. So, as a student or graduate of international relations, during my studying at the university, I had a course on ecology and energy security, and I was really fascinated about how energy interconnected with the whole geopolitical and international experience. So I focused during my coursework and my diploma specifically on aspect of energy in the general structure of energy
Mhm.
security and of course geopolitics of ecological changes and how ecological aspect can change the geopolitics of specific countries, for example with the European Union, because since the start of 2022 the European Union had implemented some interesting frameworks in order to preserve their energy security, so as a national security.
Mm.
Speaking about the, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, please go on.
So speaking about the Ukrainian Wind Energy Association, we've been active in the market for the past 16 years. We were the pioneers in this aspect. Um, our main directions of the work so consists of advocacy, both at national level and international arena. So at national level, we communicate with the Ministry of Energy, the regulator, NPC Ukrenergo, trying to facilitate innovations both in legislative framework and conditions under which market participants operate. The second aspect is, of course, legislative initiatives. It's sort of interconnected with advocacy, but in regard to legislative initiatives, we propose certain updates. So, for example, in 2024, in partnership and with the support of the Netherlands, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, we've implemented research called Legislation Fostering Wind Energy Development in Ukraine. So we've identified 13 key problems that hinders the further development of not only wind, but we're speaking about the market of renewables itself. Some of them, of these proposals that we drafted, have been already implemented in the law of Ukraine, I believe 9381, which was
Mhm.
adopted earlier this year. And the third direction of activity of our association is, of course, educational activity. So we're trying educate both as market participants and, of course, society, because society, it's all about acceptance and understanding what is renewable energy is. And of course, it's about the younger generation who will grow up and be those who deliver blades or provide service to solar panels and wind energy. So yeah, we are trying to look in the future. And the last one, it's under circumstances of war, of course, with in partnership with World Wind Energy Association, Ukrainian Wind Energy Association initiated Renewables for Ukraine. It's charitable initiative to provide those who suffered a lot from and during occupation or from shelling with solar panels and any kind of decentralized mechanism and instruments. So we've already implemented 8 projects and 3 are on their way on different stages. So that's like about association in most detailed way.
Yeah, that is excellent. And the last point, I also wanted to refer to that later. We may come back to that later when we speak
Of
about the
course.
situation, what that means. Of course, as the World Wind Energy Association, we've been working very closely. Ukrainian Wind Energy Association is one of our members, and long, of course, before the Russian started the war, we had regular meetings. I came to Kiev several times, of course, and at the moment would be more challenging. But now let's look at the overall situation. Now, is of course we know all that the country is in war, but what is the power supply, the energy market situation? What are the main sources of electricity, and what's at the moment the role of wind energy?
Of course. Before we start about the current situation, we need to understand the whole context. So, before the war, the energy system of Ukraine consisted of 56 approximately gigawatts of different generation capacities.
Mhm.
During the course of war and under constant shelling from drones and missiles, we've lost a lot. Only
Mhm.
during 2024, almost 80% percent of thermal generation had been lost under the shelling. So we need to understand what we've left with. So
Mhm.
it's renewables, of course, and it's nuclear power. We need to understand two different concepts why these generation capacities are still on and still working. So in 2024, we've provided information and 10% of energy generation in Ukraine was from renewable energy sources. So it's wind,
Mhm.
solar, it's bio, um, some kind of that. Nuclear power plant amounted to approximately 52%. And to understand the nature of these sources, if we're speaking about renewables, they're more decentralized. Wind farms, they cover a large vast of territory. So when you hit like drone or a missile, it couldn't destroy the whole wind farm. Yeah, it could destroy one or two, for example, wind turbines. By the
Oh, we
whole,
saw some pictures even. No, I
yeah,
mean, there
yeah.
were
So
also a solar plant. There was some destroyed, but not that
with
much.
solar plants, it is more complex because you have all these small particles, especially in the last like months. Russian Federation started using in their shaded drones cluster munition that is banned by Geneva Convention. So when it blows, it releases a really big amount of small particles like nails, I don't know, metal, and it can shatter a lot. So I've had like an example 3 weeks ago on my old flat. The drone hit a residential building 300 meters from my house, and I
Mhm.
found it a small particles near my home. So
Wow.
you could imagine what it can be done to solar plant on the vast territory. So yeah, and if we're speaking about nuclear power plant, it is like gentleman agreement. It is prohibited to heat nuclear power plants. We're not speaking about nuclear facilities that produce or don't doesn't produce nuclear weapons. We're speaking about nuclear power plants, which aim is to serve people for their wealth and good. So yeah, but today was a statement from the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine, Herman Galushenko, that approximately 6 gigawatts of generation capacity had been restored. Um, so yeah, we're constantly working on that.
Then you said a lot of capacity destroyed. Was it coal or what was that?
It was coal. It was thermal power plants
Mm-hmm.
because it's centralized power generation.
Mm-hmm.
You can hit with one rocket or one drone, and it can be totally destroyed. Uh,
Okay. And that
with,
the nuclear power plants, the Russians did attack that probably also because the contamination could also then
it's of
hit
course
Russia.
not condemnation, but It is always in the air. The fact that a Russian could strike a power grid that is linked to nuclear power plants.
Mhm.
So they can generate the electricity, but they couldn't transfer it to our homes, to our production facilities, etc., etc.
So that is a very challenging situation then for you. I mean, we've been, because knowing that people suffer from those blackouts, we've been, as you already mentioned, providing, but these are really kind of standalone systems for several hospitals and kindergartens, so that even there's grid doesn't deliver any power, they can have for the local use, but that is good for then maybe hours or days, the stored energy, and then of course the sun will again shine. But I see that the overall the country is not in such a stable situation. Are you personally suffering power cuts in Kiev?
No, no. Right now, we haven't been suffering any power cuts, I believe, for the last 6 months or even more. So, the state of Ukraine is doing a great work on behalf of Ukrenergo. So. Yeah, there is no such problem at this moment, but
Mhm.
we need to understand that during summer, for example, we have 9 nuclear reactors, and all of them will be under service procedures during summer. So, yeah, I believe we will face some power cuts during this summer, especially if the Russian Federation will hit some kind of power grids or generation capacities.
So now we spoke a lot about the current situation, but let's now focus a bit more on wind energy only and look into the history of wind power. Of course, this kind of modern wind technology that you've referred to, and oh, you have not mentioned yet what's the installation at the moment in Ukraine? What's the installed
So,
capacity?
yeah, so the total generation capacity of wind energy in Ukraine
Hmm.
amounted to 1.92 gigawatts. But to mention this, that some of these generation capacities are right now on the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. This includes Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk in 2014. And of course, Crimea, but in Crimea, we've had like an old fashion 100 kilowatts and 750 kilowatts wind turbines.
Actually, I have in my office, I have a picture which Andrei Konichenko, the chairman of your
Yeah.
association, gave me many years ago. But now history started much before that. We are aware that actually, when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, it was one of the first places, or it was the first place in the world, which had a research, I mean, scientific research on wind energy. Can you explain a little bit about the history? When did it start in Ukraine that people looked into wind energy and did research and maybe laid the basis for what we have today as modern wind power?
So the history, as you've already mentioned, dates back to 20th century when in 1930s there was really tremendous researcher, Yuri Kondratyuk. Um, he was a pioneer of wind energy, not only in Ukraine, but in the Soviet Union as a whole. So, in the 1931, he developed the first 100 kilowatt prototype of wind turbine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was installed in the city of Balaclava on the southwest of Crimea. Um, and before the occupation of Crimea, It was still there, so you can drive to that
Oh,
to
wow.
there, yeah, and to see the first wind turbine in Ukraine. But I believe after the occupation, the Russian Federation destroyed it. Um, to add to this, Yuri Kontorshchykov developed a first prototype, but it was never realized. The 10 megawatt double wind turbine with a height of 150 meters, with a generating capacity of 10 megawatts.
That is what he had in mind in the 30s then.
Yes. Yeah. So he was looking in the future. Interesting point about this man, actually, that he was not only focused about wind energy, he was also focused about the space and space exploration. And he's one maybe of several Ukrainians who is in NASA museum, honorary museum,
Mhm.
because by his calculations, NASA launched a shuttle to the moon. So they've used the calculations made by Ukrainian Yuri Kontorshchykov.
Very interesting, really
Yeah,
very exciting.
it's
Yes,
like just an interesting fact.
I'm personally, because we are also now doing some research trying to protect archives, wind archives. So we just had recently a webinar about the history of wind power. So it's really amazing when you now hear from your country that there were also some really fantastic pioneers at that time. So now you said that the already 19 in the 30s they started with this 100 kilowatt machine, which it's a bit strange that you say that's been destroyed very recently. We hope that you can somehow at some point get control of it back and keep it. That really must be, it's a heritage of mankind. Then what happened later? Then I just know in general, Soviet Union still in the 50s, 60s installed wind turbines. How was that in Ukraine?
Um, as for our information, so the Soviet Union focused more on conventional power generation. We're talking about,
Mhm.
of course, nuclear power generation, thermal power plants. It was much easier to understand for them. But the actual development in Ukraine, we could trace back to 1992 when
Mhm.
the first wind farm was commissioned. So it was Ahtashska wind farm on the Crimean Peninsula. It's
Mhm.
the point of this small wind turbines that were occupied later in 2013. So another aspect of this development was, of course, in 1997, the introduction of the state complex program for construction of wind farms in Ukraine. Under this program were developed 750 kilowatt wind turbines, and
Mhm.
it was fully domestic manufacturer facility, and the production itself was licensed wind turbines um, that has been that had been made a pass to Ukrainian wind energy sector. This program was in operation till 2010.
Mhm.
Um, and after that, we could trace a boom in Ukrainian wind energy sector because since 2012 we could trace a really significant increasement from 258 megawatts we've had in 2012 to approximately closely to 2 gigawatts in 2022. So if we're speaking about like milestones during this period, it's of course 2019 when Ukraine managed to commission more than 600 megawatts of wind power.
Hmm.
And after that, of course, we've had plans to commission more, but the war has already started in 2022. So during the war, we've commissioned 258 megawatts of wind power during the course of 3 years, and 32 megawatts of pre-owned wind turbines. So it is another aspect of the development of the Ukrainian market, because a lot of medium manufacturers, farmers want to improve their stability of work and trying to implement such projects. Of course, we've seen through the course of war a lot of decentralized instruments and mechanism in the context of solar panels and solar wind farms. But we've seen much more right now interesting in wind energy. Specifically, we're talking about medium manufacturers, farmers, and of course, our regional communities, because we're in close contact with them, and they do want to implement such projects in their communities. So we're speaking about, I don't know, water supply, for example.
Hmm. Okay, so you're now talking about the market structure, which is changing a little bit. That would have been one question. We know from other countries, which are of course not in such a permanent war. I had a podcast also once with a colleague from Pakistan, and there is really the market or the really consumers are driving the development. They are now setting up wind farms for factories because they just need, I mean, the power grid is not so stable in that country, not because it's destroyed by the war, but it's just still evolving, huh, from the not having electricity. So that is now becoming an important actor, and I understand important driver. So that is now also playing a role in Ukraine, that people are, or companies, enterprises are investing in maybe not only wind, but renewables to have a secured energy supply.
Yes, of course. And we have like a complex example on like a big company level. And of course,
Mhm.
we're speaking about regional communities which installed solar panels, for example. So if we're speaking a big company example, we have a company, Oco Group.
Mhm.
It is a company operating the biggest petrol station group
Mhm.
in Ukraine. And one of their new directions of operating is implementing wind farms. So they will start the construction of 3 new wind farms this year.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if we're speaking about like small scale projects, a lot of communities have already implemented the solar projects in Ukraine. Why? It is like really complex question because for communities it is really hard to understand on how such big scale projects can be implemented because with solar panels it is much easier to implement such projects. On the other hand, there is no roadmap in Ukraine on how to implement wind energy project by yourself, so you need a developer for this. But there is a lot of interest in such projects. So we've had a conference in 2024. It was some sort of webinar for representatives of regional communities. And I took a participation as the guest lecturer about the wind energy in Ukraine. And all 30 participants from regional communities were interested in implementing wind energy projects or they want the wind energy projects to be implemented in the regional community.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Can you then say, I know there are some also larger investors. Which kind of investors do you have? It's probably then a big variety. You said there are probably maybe like municipalities, so like smaller scale, but you also have some international investors, right?
The main investors in Ukrainian wind energy sector, so we have 50-50 in our wind energy market. Of course, we're speaking about Ukrainian companies who are operating. So, Detect Renewables, for example,
Mhm.
one of the biggest one, Eco Optima, who is operating in the Lviv region, and recently they've acquired a new allocation of the funds to implement their new wind project called Sokalska Wind Farm,
Mhm.
and they're in talks about the new project Belska Wind Farm with a total installed capacity of 100 megawatts.
Mhm.
And of course, if we're speaking about international companies, is of course Elementum Energy, the UK-based company, uh,
Mhm.
Notus Energy from Germany, and they're operating preferably in the south of Ukraine, so near Odessa, near Mykolaiv.
That's very interesting. So it's not, I mean, that far away from where there's still some fight going on, like in the West, but even Odessa is sometimes under attack as well, if I understand.
We can cover the question about the construction of wind farm of near front line. So yeah,
Yeah.
we have an example about this.
Yeah. Now let's come to that. But before, which manufacturers do you have? Are these kind of the well-known European,
Uh,
Western manufacturers?
so of course we have a vast majority of representation of wind turbine manufacturer here in Ukraine. So of
Mhm.
course Vestas, GE, Nordics are represented here. And the companies, the developers have already established a long-term communication with wind turbine manufacturers. So we have pretty much all uh, star wind turbine manufacturers here in Ukraine. So,
Mhm.
but speaking about wind manufacturers, we have a unique example here. So, in Zakarpattia region, there is a company called Wind Parks of Ukraine. They were based in Kramatorsk, Donetsk region. This city is now near front lines, approximately 20 to 30 kilometers. But since the war started, they've transferred all their equipment to the west of Ukraine, specifically in
Mhm.
the Zakarpattia region. They do have their own wind turbines, and they're now implementing a wind energy project in the Carpattia region called Nizhny Voritska Wind Farm with the total
Mhm.
installed capacity of 80 megawatts using their Ukrainian manufactured wind turbines.
Okay.
So it's pretty much interesting because they're trying to develop this industrial complex in the western part. And they moved all their stuff, and it's pretty unique and inspiring experience how they not only survive during the war, but how they see the future in Ukraine here and trying to develop something made in Ukraine.
That's great. And this is this those machines which they are manufacturing in Ukraine, are they developed in Ukraine? Are they some joint venture products? How does that work?
I believe they developed in Ukraine. So they
Mhm.
have wind turbines, blades, and they are also will be building towers or wind turbines. So yeah, they have like a full cycle. And they've already commissioned two wind turbines in the framework of this Nizhny Voritska wind farm. So yeah, it's pretty much good experience.
That is really, really impressive. Now, when we speak about this, and of course, we always need to speak about what are the barriers that you see are keeping a market back. I speak about this with all our guests. Now, if you can speak, maybe, of course, I'm sure that you already referred to that. Installing a wind farm under conditions of a war has special challenges. But what do you see? What are the main barriers at the moment? Because the energy demand cannot be the problem, I understand, as there is this instability even or the problems to keep the power supply.
Before we start, so yeah, energy demand has been not an obstacle, but rather positive factor to for wind energy companies to quit the balancing group of the guaranteed buyer, where they've been operating under the green tariff and transfer to the merchant market because the prices were higher than the green tariff itself.
Mhm.
That is if we're speaking about the energy demand. Um, the main three categories of obstacles. It's first of all the war and all the conditions with regard to the war. So we're speaking about logistics. We're speaking about security. If you're constructing your wind farm near the front line, as in the case of Teleguska wind farm, which is situated 100 kilometers from the front line. And the attack was managed to provide necessary safety procedures for all their workers. So, on this construction site of Teleguska wind farm, were constructed bomb shelters
Oh, okay.
workers during air raid alerts. It was obligatory to be in the bomb shelter during air raid alerts. Um, of course, we're talking about logistics. So, before the war, the logistics was primarily from ports like Odessa or Chornomorsk, but with the situation of total war on the sea, it was really hard to deliver anything safely um, via sea. So the company is using ground routes through Poland, for example, as in the case of Eco-Optima company and their wind farm Skolivska. They've commissioned during the war. It was actually the first wind farm commissioned during the war,
Mhm.
and they were managed to draw up a new logistics route. And the third aspect is with referring to, for example, Eco-Optima is, of course, specialists because um, when you install a wind turbine, for example, Nordex, you need a specialist from Nordex on the
Mhm.
construction site to supervise all the procedures. But international companies, with the start of the war, withdraw all staff from Ukraine. So
Mhm.
the developers need to understand what they're doing. So, for example, the Aqua Optima managed to we are online on the line with the staff from Nordex. The Nordic specialists were supervising were online how the turbines were installed on the site here in Ukraine.
So they did kind of online classes to teach
Uh,
the people. But that's fantastic that it still works. That is really
Yeah,
great.
yeah. I was there. The wind farm is fantastic. It is located on the mountains, like 1.5 kilometers height. So yeah, it's really fantastic, and the view. Mm. So that is the first category directly referred to war. The second and the third one is, of course, the investments, especially war risks insurances. And the third one is legislative framework and all the outcomes that may arise from this. So we're speaking about, I don't know, state support mechanisms, for example. That is also legislative framework because it is regulated by the legislative framework. But if we're speaking about the second category, investments in Ukrainian wind energy market, um, projects which require not so many money, for example.
Mhm.
They can acquire allocation of funds from Ukrainian banks or from consortium of Ukrainian banks, as it was with Eka Optima company and their new wind farm Sokalska, because the funds were allocated from the consortium of Ukrainian banks. On the other hand, we have the Tech Renewables historic agreement of more than 300 million euros investment in Ukrainian wind energy project, specifically for Teleguska wind farm phase 2, which is backed by the Danish fund. It is also another example on how you can manage war risk. Um, In this context, we as the association understand that we need to do something to improve the bankability of Ukrainian projects and to ensure they can acquire needed funds to implement their project. So, in partnership with European Energy Association of Ukraine, we've initiated the creation of an idea about the electricity price guarantee fund. We've gained letters of support from both Ministry of Energy of Ukraine and Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. And right now, the European Commission and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development are going to work on the structure of this fund. So the basic principle of this fund that for developers who enter the fund will be guaranteed that in the case that the annual average price on the market is below some kind of number,
Mhm.
you will get a compensation. But if the number is higher, you will pay a percent to the fund.
Okay. So that is very similar to a contracts for difference model
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we
it's
have in
it's
Spain.
basically like a contract for difference mechanism.
Okay, okay. So what I wanted to ask you, but you already kind of answered that, is that means that with such a framework, Ukraine and you have international investors, is also a place where at this point of time international investors can make business and some find ways of dealing with the risks which are there, of course, in any country that you have, and also with the specific risks that Ukraine has.
Yeah, of course. As I've already mentioned, we have a 50-50 proportion of international investors here in
Mhm.
Ukraine and Ukrainian companies. Some some of the investors here see the possibility for them because the Ukrainian market would possibly be very huge after the war, and they
Mhm.
try to enter the market as soon as possible in order to get their place in this market because it will be developing very fast. We're on our way to EU accession. To this aspect, we will come back later because with all the legislative framework, it is really helpful for us that we're now on our way to EU.
Yes, I think that is an important also factor for international investors that there is this very clear commitment also from European Union side
Yeah.
that uh, one day, sooner or later, Ukraine will become part of the European market, the European Union market. Now, time is running as usual, but this is, of course, a very exciting and very interesting and insightful discussion that we're having here. Now, let's come to the end and look a little bit into the future. Now, we heard from you, of course, the country is not probably very flexible because a lot of the generation sites have been destroyed. Nuclear is still ongoing. That's something not everybody will be happy about, but that's where you have with what you have to live now. But I understand there is a strong kind of also on the local level, people are investing not only in wind, but wind and all those renewables. And I mean, when we look at just the physical facts, Ukraine is the largest, will be by land the largest EU member, and that's what you basically need for renewable energy because land is directly kind of correlating with renewable resources, whether it's wind or solar or bioenergy, which you also can do a lot, of course. So what do you see? What are also, of course, looking beyond the war, and we all hope, of course, that the war is soon over. What do you see as the prospects, and when do you think Ukraine can have this really almost entirely supplied with renewable energy sources?
Uh, so of course we're speaking about the long future after the war because our main goal right now is to win this war and to
Of
preserve
course.
our independence. We do have a national framework for these plans. So of course I'm speaking about National Energy and Climate Plan and the National Renewable Energy Action Plan up to 2030. There is also, of course, a strategy up to 2050, but it is classified due to war. So if we're speaking about the 2030 period, we aim to commission 6.1 gigawatts of onshore wind power and 100 megawatts of offshore wind power. And it is really important that the state declare the interest in offshore wind power in Ukraine because the Black Sea and the Azov Sea is really important in those future prospects for 100% renewables in Ukraine gross energy consumption. But the ending goal of 100% is really hard to analyze. We've had projectile research that Ukraine could reach 97% of renewables in Ukraine till 2070.
Yeah. Well, let me just be a bit more optimistic because I know how fast things can go. When you look at my home
Yeah.
country, Germany, it's now almost two-thirds, which is much smaller, huh? And a much smaller country. But of course, knowing that the special conditions in which you are, of course, it is not predictable. That is very obvious. What we do see is that there is a big potential that people now really are very serious about it. I think that's kind of the main message. And those who are interested in working with Ukraine, I'm sure they can contact you as well. We, from our side, will certainly continue at least as long as this war is ongoing with the support, which is, of course, not based on a commercial basis, but supporting charities and those people who otherwise, children or sick people who otherwise, of course, could not be part of this. Yeah, I wish you personally all the very best, especially that this war may end soon. Stay all, of course, well, and all the best in developing the wind power and renewable energy market in Ukraine.
Thank you, Stefan, for this opportunity to cover such an important question as the Ukrainian wind energy and wind energy market to your viewers and your listeners. And of course, thank you for your personal support of Ukraine and the support we get from World Wind Energy Association. It is really important for us to know that we're not left here alone. We have such good friends of Ukraine here right now, and I do believe that the renewable energy sector will prosper here after the war. And of course, it is prospering even during the war.
That is what we heard. That's very
Yeah.
encouraging. For those people who want to support you, please, we have a website, renewablesforukraine.org. You can go there. There is more information about the projects that we have been able to already provide with renewable energy installations. We are now approaching almost 500,000 euros of donations, which I think indeed is a strong signal from the renewables community. And most of this money comes from people from the renewable community. It's all private donations, and I think that's really strong signal. We should be proud of that. And yeah, with this, I would say again, thank you very much for your time. All the very best to you personally, to your colleagues, to your country, and of course, the wind people in particular.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you.
Thank you with this. Thank you also to our audience for listening, and goodbye for today.